I'd like to have a brief conversation with you about this very interesting report published or commissioned by the European Parliament. The title of the report, The Ethical and Societal Challenges of the Upcoming Technological Storm. This report is written, if you ask me, based on the wrong premise. That's not a fault of my colleagues, it's a mistake by the European Parliament. Because what it does is, it says AI, listed here, is coming towards us as some exogenous event, a storm. And then we ask ourselves the question, how can we weather the storm? How can we regulate all these nasty little side effects of AI away? Well, surely we can do better than that, right? We can do better than just trying to weather the storm. It's much more inspirational to try to make the weather. But you know what I mean, and in a metaphorical sense, we can do this today. And who can do this better than designers? The people who not only have a firm grasp of the technology, but also have an understanding and a sensitivity of the humans, of the society that this technology is confronted with, but the same humans and society that develop the technology. So this is what we do, our industrial design engineering AI community. We are proud to have grown into a very active, dynamic bunch of designers, scholars, teachers, and students. And we're super happy to be here with you today and to be hosting this event.
Some of the leaders of the field, the academic field of what we call artificial intelligence, are now starting to critique this machine learning, pure statistical approach. I want to invite us to design the language, design the metaphor, design the words, and reflect on those. How do we start to influence the way in which we talk about this monolithic term of artificial intelligence? Because one of the things about design is that we're designing the thing, the imaginary, and also the practice. And the other key thing about being in a design world, or the world of human-computer interaction, is that multidisciplinarity is key. We cannot do it alone. So I wanted to do a shout out to this because the questions that we ask typically are the most critical thing. The answers come from having the right questions, and the right questions are collaboratively brought together across our disciplines. One of our things our community is pretty good at is, I wonder if. So that is my invitation to wonder if AI is the right term. And what is AI anyway? Thank you.
I'm kind of going to be talking about, I guess, what Elizabeth was referring to in her great talk about that kind of imaginary, that space of the imaginary, and the role that metaphors play in that for myself as a designer. And in Google, on your sort of intranet page, you're meant to have like a 3-word mission underneath your name. And for about 6 years when I was at Google Research, mine was centaurs, not butlers. And so this idea of like using kind of the human-machine hybrid, that sort of space of amplification, sort of a sort of sub-metaphor here. One of the things that I loved about this kind of idea was it sort of felt like a coming back to that embodiment metaphor in a way, that it felt like not the neurons in the brain. It sort of got us away from this kind of like centralized kind of imaginary, to use Elizabeth's term, of the brain controlling everything. And it felt more like, you know, the nerve cells that we have all over our body doing things all of the time. It felt like a knee. It felt like a knee reflex or something that was just doing this thing all the time and doing it incredibly well. The wonderful octopus. I can't eat octopus anymore because I've read too many books about them. And coming back to the knees, and coming back to another just famous quotation by Bertrand Meyer, a famous ETH professor. I don't know where he is now, but I love this. Real systems have no top. Thinking again about different architectures of how you might create these interactions, where the brains might be, whether the brains are tiny and in the world rather than huge and in the sky. And so one of the other things that I think is kind of, at least this helps me think through as a designer, is thinking about different ways that you might employ personal AI, whether it's kind of amplification in the sense that Elizabeth was referring to, and I often sort of call like pedal assist. Who here has an e-bike or a pedal assist bike or has tried one? The sort of, you are pedaling, right? But it's like, whoa, I don't pedal that fast. This is amazing. Versus something which is more about kind of autonomy of the agent and you giving it sort of direction and sort of criteria for success and letting it do its own thing. Looking at this idea of the site of AI design being the planet and being kind of the very fact that we know of anthropogenic climate change is something which was enabled by planetary scale computation. What can we invent and design to weather the storm that is coming? Thank you.
And I'm very curious to hear from you, from your particular positions, what do you see are the positions that designers can engage to actually be effective in this expanded universe of design?
Whenever you're in your practice, it's not solutionism to a very rigid, small answer, a question, but actually to really unpack why you're doing what you're doing, what it means, and to use anything that you're working on, if you like, as a rhetorical object to be questioned around, all right, I'm addressing this specific issue, problem, whatever, but also this is a provocation, and I think a lot of what we just saw, Matt, it's like, the provocation. So there is the solution, but it's not the ultimate and only solution. It's a provocation to be questioned, addressed, and reflected on. And I think that's why I come back to that idea of talk about what you're doing. Multidisciplinarity, allowing others to come in and, in the best sense of the word in design, critique what you're doing, to use whatever you're working on as a conversational space to think about what else could be possible.
A lot of it comes from that early stage of what we used to call material exploration. And the material, in the sense, working with Bean and Emily and others in Google Brain, it was very much kind of computer science. It was hardcore computer science stuff, and we would sit there, explain it to me like you're explaining it to a Labrador, please. And then we would, I think the gift of designers is to make loads of stuff that looks real but might be dumb very quickly. So you do that, make as much as you can, and then show it back to the computer scientists, who then cry a little and go, no, that's not what I meant at all. But what you have made me think is this. And so, this was precisely what happened. Time and time again, was we made stuff quickly that stretched their understanding of what they thought they understood incredibly deeply, which they did understand incredibly deeply, but they understood it with a certain application, a certain context. And because we just blundered in there and started drawing stuff, it led all of us in sort of really interesting pathways from there. And I think that, at some level, a lot of the work that I was doing was kind of product invention and those kinds of things, but similar approaches, I think, apply to sort of much more sober investigation of policy and ethics, and, use those tools of what has been called, speculative design, whatever it might be, or, just designing and doing things quickly to make stuff that people can talk about and kick around.
Design policy looks at the role of design in products and software and how designers make things, and then analyze how design terms and the structures of design operate in relationship to policy and technology. So design policy is the act of using design to make policies around software and hardware more understandable. But how design impacts policy, I think we can most clearly see in things like dark patterns, which are design patterns that unintentionally or intentionally manipulate users into making decisions they normally wouldn't make. Dark patterns as a term was coined by designer Harry Bringle in 2010. I think of dark patterns as being both intentional and unintentional. Is it an intentional dark pattern to suppress privacy when social networks vary their security settings, or are designers and engineers not sure where to place the appropriate buttons? Is it intentional that marketplaces like Amazon have confusion, price confusion, or again, is it just bad design? Design is what distills code and policy into digestible and interactive interfaces for users. Design is the thing that explains what the code and policy are outlining. So for issues like labor, harassment, security, and privacy, design is incredibly important. Ideally, users don't have to deeply understand a social network's policy on harassment in order to report it. Design takes the technical infrastructure, the ability to select a piece of content, to click on it, and then decide what button it goes into or what bucket of harassment it goes into. Those buckets, the way it's delineated, that is the design interpreting the policy, making it human readable. So it's taking the political infrastructure, the policy, what kind of harm, technical infrastructure, the actual ability to report, and fold it into the product design process, the online harassment reporting system. And I listened to every song that band had every day for a month on repeat. And you know what that did? It messed up my Discover Weekly. It destroyed my Discover Weekly. My Discover Weekly is still destroyed. And that was 7 years ago. And I was thinking about this the other day. You know, this may seem innocuous and benign, but why can't I intervene in the algorithm in this product? Why can't I uplift or show what I'm interested in now? Why can't I say, these are the things I'm interested in? And this older data, this older version of Caroline, she doesn't like that stuff anymore. And I'm not alone. Again, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of papers coming out. And there's also this great project I'm a big fan of called the Data Nutrition Project. And this multi-year project was supported by Consumer Reports, really looking at, again, how data labels are needed for different data sets used by an AI model. And we need this kind of legibility and understanding to really make AI more user-friendly. Which brings me to a project I just worked on, designing for social media recommendation algorithm transparency with the Center for Democracy and Technology. We just had a paper come out, like allowing them to move and control how their data is interacted with. It's also showing how different data is gathered by social media algorithms. Maybe data is gathered from content like news sources and academic behavioral data and advertising data, and then how the behavior of their actual account, and the account similar to yours and websites you visited. And we really model, and then you see this outgoing data. And the outgoing data in the black corner is things that will never be shared. So, you know, there are things that are never leaving the platform, but you can move other things into that section. You could move all of these data points into that section. But it really allows the user to say, this is what I want shared, this is what I don't want shared. And this is also maybe what I want shared to academics or to trusted partners, or this is what I want shared very publicly, right? And it's also allowing the user to enact their own opinion and their own agency, their own desires of how their data is affected. And this is what I think is transparency in action. And this is the part I think we need to start illustrating with how algorithmic models work across any product, because people should have an opinion on how their data is accessed and also have a way to directly inform and impact that model. Similar to my Spotify example, we need to allow users to impact or affect the model by saying, this is the information I care about. This is the inferences I want you to pull from. And these are the kinds of recommendations I'd like to see. And this is the kind of stuff I'd like deleted and not accessed. And as you see at the very bottom of this, or back on this page, all the way down here, you can delete everything. Thank you. I know I gave a whistle-stop tour, but thank you so much. I'm Caroline Sinders. I'm an artist and researcher, and I care deeply about how to make AI more explainable and more legible to everyday audiences. So thank you so much.
So I'm super excited to be here today, and I want to share with you some work we're doing around what we call closing the AI innovation gap. What we see when we talk to companies repeatedly is data science teams come up with ideas no one wants. Design teams come up with ideas that can't be built. That is the gap. Can we come up with ideas that can be built that people want is what we're trying to do, and how do we get better at this? So there's a lot of hype right now. There's a lot of, data's the new oil, AI's the new electricity. That's the hype, but this is kind of the dark side. Currently, 85% of projects fail. And when I say fail, I mean fail to deploy. I'm not talking about all the ones that fail after deployment. Just getting from an idea to a deployed system, we really suck at. And so to me, this is a super interesting space to work, because if it's 85% bad, then I can maybe make it better. What my team's also seen is a lot of what we call missed low-hanging fruit. Opportunities where just really simple, easy AI would make things better, both for service providers and for customers. And we're very curious, like, why? The first problem we're seeing is when companies try to do AI innovation, they often choose things that are super, super difficult. And I'm going to blame the media. It's all creating this illusion that AI is a superhuman intelligence, and that causes people who are trying to follow user-centered design methods. So you have a data science team talking to domain experts, what do you want? And they focus on their greatest uncertainty. If I had a super intelligent human, what would I want to do? So their search of the opportunity space just really looks at very hard problems where we need super amazing model performance to deliver value to people. And the majority of the action space remains unexplored. So IBM's done fabulous work in this area, really analyzing their own teams and writing about it. And they note that data scientists are explorers. They're really looking for relationships in the data, but they are treated like engineers, where they're given a spec at the beginning of a Scrum sprint and expected to deliver on that. And that's just not going to happen. Finally, I'll add, design is really just either uninvited or unprepared to innovate in this space. So I would describe this like my experiences of doing interfaces in the 1980s, where designers are brought on after all the decisions are made and like, can you just make this pretty? And it's still very lipstick on the pig. Design teams only come in after applications have been selected. I like to, when I think of ideation, I really draw from Donald Schoen's idea of reflection in action, and he uses the metaphor of a jazz musician who knows their instrument so well, they understand kind of the materiality, they can simply create music while playing. Designers have not internalized the material capabilities so well that they can simply imagine what it can do. We are a long way from that. In addition, AI makes it super hard for us to do it, because what designers really want are the capabilities, the what can it do, but all of the discourse on AI is about mechanisms. How does it make an inference? Not what are the inferences it can make. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is the problem in this case. So brainstorming, one of the common rules is don't put limits on yourself. Go with wild ideas. The problem with AI is we keep thinking of things it can't do. We actually need to lower our expectations. Think of the dumber things it can do. When we see design teams ideate, what we consistently see is they come up with ideas where there's high uncertainty that a capability can be delivered, and there's high output complexity, which means it's super hard to think through all of the different ways this can go wrong. So they really push towards invention and not at all innovation. Designers really aren't prepared. They need better data skills, and they need to have a material understanding of AI capabilities. And we're proposing that that design would be helpful if it really facilitated ideation between domain experts and data scientists based on what we know AI is good at doing, not based on the most difficult tasks where humans have needs. So we're going to stay in kind of AI's sweet spot. And how can we keep design involved, not just in that early stage ideation, we want to see it there, but actually moving along in a Scrum process, and particularly when you're contemplating a pivot, which we think generally just doesn't happen. So companies are committed to Agile, but they're really just doing waterfall in tiny little bites. They don't effectively pivot by doing customer discovery. All right, enough from me. Thank you.
You said that designers need more data capabilities and they need to understand it better, what it is, what it can do, what the constraints are. What do you think should be implemented in curricula across the world to get this capability?
Look at particularly craftspeople that gain a great material understanding, and let's say we're just going to explore all of the different ways people have leveraged this and talk about the strengths and benefits of those different materials. Obviously, we don't have a shop to send students to cut up AI. It doesn't work like that, but there are an increasing number of no-code, low-code tools to get a sense of what's possible. But the other part is to really do critiques of systems that are in the world and to review, you know, hundreds of, not like we're going to talk about 2 or 3.
We've been thinking about potentially using AI to help design processes.
Like the way to do that is to resist the urge to focus on the most uncertain parts of design and thinking that AI is going to help you there, and instead look at what is the absolutely most tedious, time-consuming thing where people perform with tremendous consistency. That's where AI is going to help. If we're going to use AI in industrial design, maybe it should be sanding, right? That's not rocket science. Trying to sense when something's done. I think there's a lot of interesting things to do there. But to me, the first and easiest action space, and we think of this in healthcare, when you train a decision support system, in healthcare, it's really good with textbook cases because that is literally what almost every case is. That is nowhere near where a doctor needs help.